You're watching the free version of Silhouette Essentials. For projects and footage, head to borisfx.com for the premium download.
Now let's take a look at the paint node that has the camera all painted out. Okay, it's time to move on to paint the last task for this shot, removing the helicopter. Okay, here we are in the last part of this class. We're going to paint out the helicopter. So I'm going to bring in a roto and a paint node. I'm going to hook them up, make sure that the data ports are connected so that the paint node can use any tracking from the roto node. And then I'll hook up the roto node to the source. And arrange it over here to the side. Maybe I'll add another dot, Alt Option, move it over here. So the window's getting a little crowded. I'm just going to turn off the show overview. And so now I'm going to use tracking to paint out the helicopter. So here's the helicopter, but I've already tracked this helicopter in a previous class. So I'm going to go back and find that tracking. I'm going to go back to the paint demo. I'm going to click on the roto node, click on the helicopter track. Command C, copy it, go back to denoise paint, and then click on the roto node, and then Command V, paste it into the roto node. I'll enable the tracking shape, and you can see that there, and we can look at this in the stabilized view. So there's the tracked helicopter. There's a few frames at the head and the tail where it failed, but that's okay. We can hand paint those frames. So this is the more procedural part of the task. And we're going to use auto paint. So we're going to find a frame that we can paint and apply those paint strokes with the tracking. I'm going to disable the visibility on that shape and we'll go to the paint node. I'm going to maybe zoom in a little bit, hold down the shift and the middle mouse or whatever button is programmed to the middle button on your Wacom pen. And we're going to find a frame where we can make a paint stroke. So we're looking for a frame that is kind of in the middle where most of the shot will be consistent if I paint from one of the middle frames and not the end or the beginning. And I also want to make sure that I'm not going to bring in some of the wingsuit flyer. I'm going to click on the clone tool, make sure that alpha is enabled, and make my softness up to 100%. I'm going to make my brush bigger. So I'm going to make a few test strokes or a test stroke to see if the gradation looks correct. Hold down Shift and then paint. That looks pretty good. It might be a little bit light. I might just redo that. I'm going to just Command Z and remove my paint strokes. We'll try again. It's a little bit trial and error. It's a little bit dark. So we'll do one more try. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now we're going to apply the track to the paint strokes. So we're going to first make sure that all of these boxes are correct. So we want to make sure that we use all the tracking. I'm going to go back to the roto node to find the first frame. And that would be 61. And the tracking goes all the way up to 123. So we'll go back to the paint node, select the auto paint window, change this to 61, click tab. Okay, so then 123, that's correct already. Now we have to go back to the frame where our paint was. We'll select our strokes, make sure that match move is enabled, and make sure that in the transform pull down that we have selected our tracked layer. And now we can press play. Okay, so that looks pretty good. The helicopter's gone, besides a few frames at the head and the tail. So we'll start at the head. So this will just be a manual paint pulling from the frame before. I'm just going to let's see here, and use frame. So this frame is clean, 61, and here's the helicopter in 60. So I'm going to use frame 61 as my source. And I'm going to enable the caps lock and just use the arrow keys to quickly line up my source using the cliff face. And then we'll just paint that out, kind of just go back and forth. Does it look like it's gone? It is. Make sure brush is at 100%. And keep going until there's no more helicopter. And then we'll go to the end of the shot. And it's visible here. So now we need to use 123 as our source. And we're going to use the clouds to help line this up. The gradation in the sky at the corners a little bit more extreme. That looks pretty good. And we're done. We'll take off the stabilization in the viewer to none, make it none, and we'll play back the shot. Okay, so the helicopter is removed, and now it's time to set up the nodes for the render. Okay, so for the render, I'm just going to disable the demo for the helicopter and just enable the finished paint here. So this has all the camera removed and the helicopter. So now I'm going to disable the rest of these nodes, or enable them. So after my paint node here, you can see, let's take a look at the alpha. If I click A, you can see I have some soft edges here, but I want my alpha to have hard edges, and that the alpha goes all the way to the last transparent pixel. So if I add the alpha threshold here, I can just change that value. So the default value is 50, but I lowered it to 30. So lowering the threshold value will turn more pixels to white. So it's going to just remove that opacity at the edges. So if I click A here, you can see the alpha. We'll go to the painted node here, and now you can see the result. And then we have our output node here, and you can see that I've already filled this out to save time. I have the correct naming into my correct folder, and I've actually already rendered it out. So there's still one more step to do, and that is the regraining step, and I will do that in a separate session. Once more, I've made an additional session. I compartmentalize my procedures as I feel it aids in keeping me organized, and I also like to keep my output nodes associated with specific tasks. Here I will show you a method where one can just regrain the painted areas using the alpha channel. I have my node tree set up here, and I will take you through it. With the new regrain node, it's easy to add back the grain. I have the original plate on the left, the denoise plate in the middle, and the denoise painted plate on the right. So here on top of the regrain node, you can see that each of these inputs is labeled for the different inputs: plate, degrained, and the comp, which can be the painted plate. And inside the painted plate, I have the alpha where our paint was. And let's click on that and click A, and you can see that's where the alpha channel is. And then I've also put an alpha to color node below this to put the alpha channel into all of the different channels into the image. And then we pipe this into the matte image inside the regrain node itself. So now we are set up to regrain just the areas where the paint was done. Okay, so then down here in the regrain node, I'll just pull this up here. I want to make sure that I have matte enabled checked. And then you press the Analyze Footage button and wait for this to run its course. This calculates the response curve of the grain, which is then normalized and applied. And you can also see here the sample box overlay, which is defined for the grain scattering. Okay, so let's go in and compare. I'm going to go to an area where maybe the helicopter was. Okay, so here is the original plate, and we'll just zoom in. And here in the regrain node, if I click on that, you can see that the grain was replaced. I'll just take down the gamma a little bit. You can see. I'm also going to do a little split here. So we'll take a snapshot here, and then we'll go to the original plate, and I'll just click the compare so you can see now that the grain looks pretty good. So I'm just going to cycle through the channels. If the grain looks a little too light or a little too heavy in some of the channels, you can go back into the parameters and start changing some of those. But we're going to just try to finish this class up now, and we can explore those options in a different class later on. And I'll turn off the snapshot split screen, and we'll go back down to the regrain node. Okay, so this looks good. We've just regrained the areas where the paint was. And now we are all done. So all we have to do is render that out. And I've set up my file format with the PNG. I've checked the alpha channel because I want to deliver the paint with the alpha channel. And also I have the location and the name set up correctly. A lot was covered in this class concerning the paint window and the clone tool. I hope you enjoyed learning some variations on paint techniques and methodology as well. Next up is the class on marker removal. See you then.